I bought a small used car, nothing fancy, but it worked perfectly fine. My daughter laughed and said, "Real fathers buy luxury cars." She refused to ever sit in it. She claims it's an embarrassment. I said nothing, just manage my small car. Years later, her own car got seized after she defaulted on payments. She wanted to get a car above her means at all cost. She came to ask for mine. I handed her the same car she mocked and vowed never to sit in. She was so ashamed of herself. I looked at her and waited for her to start the car and said to her, "It still moves, doesn't it?" What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, if you enjoy stories like this, you want to be part of the 10% of our viewers who click on the like button. This really makes us happy. If you are yet to subscribe to our channel, kindly support us today by subscribing to this channel. This helps us to bring you more beautiful stories. It will be great to tell us where you are watching us from in the comments section. Now let's get into the details of the story. I remember the day I bought the car like it happened last week. The sky was gray and smelled like summer rain was just waiting for the right moment to fall. I'd spent 3 months searching every classified ad, every corner lot, and every conversation in the break room at work trying to find a car that wouldn't empty my bank account but would still get me from one side of town to the other without stalling on a freeway ramp. It wasn't glamorous, that car. A compact little thing with faded red paint that had started to pink in places where the sun had won. One headlight was slightly dimmer than the other, and the upholstery had a small tear on the passenger seat that looked like someone had tried to hide it with duct tape. But it started on the first turn of the key. The engine didn't hiccup, not once. I remember sitting behind the wheel in the seller's driveway, gripping it like I had just shaken hands with a dependable old friend. It was the car I could afford, and at that time in my life, that meant more than what it looked like. I was never the type to chase flash or prove anything through chrome and leather. I worked hard, maintenance at the local university, good hours, decent pay, and health benefits, which felt like a luxury in itself. I raised my daughter alone after her mother left when she was 5. I still remember the way she clung to my leg that day, asking if Mom was coming back after the weekend. She didn't. And from that moment on, I made it my mission to keep our lives stable, even if it meant stretching every dollar until it squealed. When I bought that used car, I wasn't thinking about pride or image. I was thinking about how many groceries I could fit in the trunk, if it had good gas mileage, and whether I could rely on it to make school drop-offs during the winter without breaking down in a snowbank. It was a practical choice, not a performance piece. But when I brought it home, proud in my quiet way, my daughter's reaction hit me like a gut punch. She walked out the front door, phone in hand, barely looking up before letting out a laugh that cut deeper than she realized. "That's the car you bought? Real dads drive Benz S, or at least something that doesn't look like a Hot Wheels reject." She said it with a smirk, like she was trying to be funny, but there was something behind her eyes, a flicker of disappointment or maybe embarrassment. She was 16 then, just old enough to start caring about how the world saw her, and just young enough to think money grew from confidence and credit cards. I didn't respond. I just patted the hood of that old car, gave her a tight smile, and said, "It gets us where we need to go." But the damage was done. She refused to ride in it, made excuses, said her friend's mom could give her a lift to school or that she'd walk even if it was raining. I knew she was ashamed. Ashamed of the car. Ashamed, maybe, of me. For a long time after that, I kept the hurt bottled up. I told myself it didn't matter, that she was just a teenager, and teens say all kinds of things they don't mean. But late at night, sitting at the kitchen table with bills spread out and my check stub in front of me, I'd hear her laughter replay in my head. That one word, real, stuck. Real dads. What did she think I was? I thought of every birthday cake I baked, every homework project I stayed up helping her finish, every double shift I took to make sure she had new shoes for the start of the school year. Wasn't that real? Wasn't sacrifice more real than leather seats and a designer logo on a steering wheel? I never asked her to understand the weight I carried, but it hurt knowing she measured my worth by something as hollow as horsepower. But I didn't let that moment define me. I kept driving the car. I kept going to work, fixing what needed fixing, and showing up for every parent-teacher conference, even when she asked me not to. I watched her grow up chasing everything I couldn't give her: stylish clothes, sleek tech, trendy friends who all seemed to care more about Instagram than integrity. And through it all, I kept my silence. I didn't argue with her choices, didn't lecture her about the value of money or the danger of debt. I figured life would teach her what I couldn't force her to hear. Still, every time I slid into that driver's seat, I remembered her words, and I drove with a mixture of resolve and resignation. There were times I thought about upgrading, not for status, but because I knew how the world looked at people like me. The ones in worn boots and faded jeans. The ones who kept things running behind the scenes while others took the credit. But every time I saved a little, something came up. A medical bill, a school expense, a sudden rent hike. Life didn't leave room for luxury, not for people like me. And slowly, I began to wear that truth like armor. That car became more than transportation. It became a symbol of endurance. It was proof that I could make things last, even when nothing else seemed to. Looking back now, I realized that was the start of the distance between us. Not the car itself, but what it represented. She wanted more, and I couldn't blame her. I raised her to want more, but she mistook aspiration for arrogance. And I, in my quiet pride, let that misunderstanding grow between us like a wall we both pretended wasn't there. Still, I never stopped loving her. Even when she rolled her eyes at me. Even when she slammed her bedroom door. Even when she called that car an embarrassment. I just kept driving, day in, day out. Because that's what real fathers do. She got her first job offer a few weeks after college graduation. A decent starting salary at a marketing firm that promised room for growth. I was proud of her. I clapped the loudest at her graduation. Took pictures with her under the sun in that square hat she used to laugh at. Told everyone at work about her achievement. She'd done what I always hoped. Pushed past where I stood in life. But no sooner had she signed the contract than she began talking about the car she would buy. Not just any car. She was aiming for a brand new luxury SUV. Leather seats, touchscreen dashboard, panoramic roof. I stayed quiet at first, listening as she rattled off features like she was reading from a brochure. The same girl who once laughed at my rusted hatchback was about to sign a 5-year loan on a car that would eat up half her monthly income. I remember asking her once, just once, if she'd thought about starting smaller. Something pre-owned, maybe, just until she had savings built up. She sighed like I was embarrassing her in public. Dad, I deserve something nice. I've worked hard. I'm not going to drive some crusty hand-me-down. There it was again. That same sneer from years ago. This time, it stung less. Not because I didn't care, but because I'd come to expect it. I nodded and said nothing more. But deep down, I saw the road she was speeding down, and I knew exactly where it ended. You don't raise a child with sacrifice only to watch them learn lessons the hard way, but sometimes that's the only way they stick. The SUV arrived a week later. Glossy black, parked right in front of the apartment she could barely afford. She posted about it on social media with a caption that made my chest tighten. Manifested this. Real independence starts with the right car. Independence. As if the loan company wasn't her silent co-pilot. As if her freedom didn't come shackled in interest rates. I clicked the heart button like every other proud parent, but I didn't comment. I had nothing to say that wouldn't sound bitter. Still, I watched her drive off that evening, sunglasses on, music blasting, one hand on the wheel like she owned the world. Part of me wanted to believe she did. 3 months later, things started to unravel. The job wasn't what she expected. Long hours, office politics, a manager who promised more than he delivered. Her rent went up. Groceries got expensive. The shine of the SUV dulled under late fees and anxiety. She called less. Visited even less than that. And then one afternoon, while I was trimming the hedges out front, she showed up. No makeup, hair pulled back, eyes swollen. She sat on the porch steps like a child again. They took it, she said softly. I missed 3 payments. They said there's nothing I can do now. I put the trimmers down, sat beside her, said nothing. She looked up at me, and for the first time in years, there was no judgment in her eyes, just a raw, bruised kind of humility. I messed up, Dad. I thought I had it all figured out. And now I've got no car, barely enough to cover rent, and I'm scared I'll lose my job if I'm late one more time. I waited a beat, letting her words settle in the air between us. Then I stood, walked to the garage, and pulled the tarp off my old car. It had been sitting quietly, still starting up on the first turn like it always did. I handed her the keys. She blinked, confused. Wait, you still have this thing? I nodded. Never gave up on it. She hesitated, then took the keys, fingers trembling. She walked over to the driver's side, stared at the chipped paint, the worn tires, the dented bumper. She looked back at me, a flicker of shame in her eyes. Then I said the only thing that felt right. It still moves, doesn't it? She sat behind the wheel in silence for a while. Didn't even start the engine at first. Just sat there, maybe remembering everything she'd once said about that car. About me. And I stood on the porch, watching her, the same way I used to when she was little, learning how to ride her bike without training wheels. Wanting to help, but knowing I had to let her learn to balance on her own. The first time she called me in tears wasn't about love or heartbreak. It wasn't about a friend betraying her or a mistake at work. It was about money. A subject I knew all too well, and one she had always tried to keep at arm's length, as though pretending she was immune to its weight could make her untouchable. She called at 9:17 p.m., and I remember the exact time because I was watching the local news, half asleep in my recliner with the remote resting on my chest. Her voice cracked before she even got to the point, and when she said, "Dad, I need help," something in me braced for the storm. I didn't ask her to explain right away. I just listened, letting her speak through the sobs and embarrassment, as if confessing a crime. The SUV had been towed from her work parking lot in front of half her office. The repo man didn't wait for discretion. He clipped it and pulled off like it was just another job, not a scar on someone's pride. She hadn't made a payment in 3 months. Every time the reminder popped up on her phone, she swiped it away like an ad. She thought she'd get back on track, that her next check would fix everything. But life doesn't wait for ideal timing, and lenders are never patient. She begged them for a chance, but the papers had already been signed, and the car was already gone. That night, I didn't offer a lecture or an "I told you so." I just told her to come home. She showed up with a duffel bag and that hollow look I'd seen in too many coworkers' eyes during layoffs and foreclosures. She walked into my house like she didn't deserve to be there, like failure had taken her place and left her outside herself. She sat at the kitchen table, hands folded, eyes low. And I, still in my work boots from the day, made her tea and said, "You're not the first to fall short, and you won't be the last. What matters is what you do now." The next morning, she asked if she could borrow my car. Not permanently, just until she could figure things out. I walked her out to the garage without a word. The old hatchback sat where it always had, with its cracked windshield, sun-bleached mirrors, and quiet confidence. I could tell she was hoping maybe I'd upgraded and the memory of her insults wouldn't sting so loud. But there it was, the same car she'd mocked all those years ago. Her face changed. A twist of guilt, a hard swallow of pride. I handed her the keys without saying a word, waited for her to slide into the driver's seat, and when she hesitated before turning the ignition, I finally said it. "It still moves, doesn't it?" She didn't respond, not right away. She just stared at the steering wheel like it was a reminder of everything she didn't want to admit. The seatbelt clicked, the key turned, and the engine fired up like it always did. Smooth, reliable, unapologetic. That car didn't care about being flashy. It never had. But now, it held a weight it never asked for. It became her rescue, her reality check. And as she drove away, I stood there in the driveway, arms crossed, watching the car that had once embarrassed her become the one thing she needed most. There was no pleasure in that moment, no satisfaction in seeing her brought low. There was only a quiet ache, a father watching his daughter finally see the world without a filter. Over the next few weeks, she drove that car everywhere. To work, to the grocery store, even to job interviews when she started questioning if her current position could really sustain her life. She didn't complain. Not once. Not about the manual locks, the scratchy radio, or the way the rear window sometimes fogged up if you didn't kick on the defrost soon enough. If anything, she started to treat it with a kind of reverence, like she was making amends with each mile. I noticed she even washed it one Saturday morning, standing in the driveway with a sponge and bucket like she was trying to scrub off the shame. I didn't say anything, just watched her from the porch with my coffee in hand, letting her make peace on her own terms. What struck me most wasn't how she changed outwardly. It was the way her attitude shifted. She started coming over more often, staying for dinner, asking me about my day instead of just venting about hers. One evening she sat on the couch next to me, quiet for a long time before saying, "I used to think success was about how you looked doing it. But maybe it's more about showing up, even when it's ugly." I didn't respond right away. I let her words hang there, suspended between us like a truth we both finally agreed on. Then I nodded and said, "Took me a long time to learn that too." It was around that time she got a new job offer. Something smaller but steadier, with better hours and less pressure to perform. She took it without fanfare. No celebratory post, no champagne selfie. Just a quiet shift. She asked to keep the old car for a little while longer, just until she could save up. I agreed. No conditions, no timeline. That car, once a source of division between us, had become a bridge. It carried more than just her body. It carried our strained relationship back into something human, something soft around the edges. The moment that stays with me the most, though, came one Sunday when she stopped by unannounced. She walked into the house, set the keys on the counter, and said, "It's yours again, Dad. I think I'm ready now." There was no ceremony, no tears, just a quiet returning. I picked up the keys, turned them over in my hand, and felt a strange kind of peace settle in my chest. She didn't stay long that day, just long enough to hug me before heading out. And as I stood there, watching her walk down the path with a lighter step, I realized something. Pride doesn't come from what we drive or wear or post. It comes from what we survive. And she had survived something, the crushing weight of ego, the hard crash of reality, and came out with a humility I'd stopped believing she was capable of. The day she returned the keys was quieter than I expected. There was no big apology, no dramatic confrontation, no tears spilled across my kitchen table. Just a simple knock at the door, and when I opened it, there she was, standing in jeans and a plain gray sweater, the same one I remembered buying her in a clearance bin 5 Christmases ago. Her hair was tied back, no makeup, no curated version of herself. Just her, as she was. She looked tired but not defeated, like someone who'd walked through something hard and made peace with the bruise. She held out the keys like a truce offering, and I took them gently from her hand. For a few seconds, we just stood there, the sound of the refrigerator humming in the background, the faint breeze through the half-open window. The air was full of unsaid things, and I felt every one of them pressing against my chest. She didn't say thank you in that moment, but she didn't have to. I saw it in her eyes, the way she met mine without flinching. There was no more pretending, no more posturing. She wasn't the girl who once laughed at my car anymore. She was a woman now, shaped by her own mistakes, carrying the weight of her choices with a grace she didn't yet know she had. She sat down at the table, the same one where we'd eaten 1,000 silent dinners, where I'd once taped her spelling words to the edge and made her repeat them until she got every one right. I poured 2 cups of coffee and joined her. No sugar, no milk. She drank it black now. I noticed that. "You keeping the car?" she asked, eyes on the steam rising from her mug. I shrugged. "It's got a few more miles left in it," I said. She smiled faintly, a kind of weary grin that carried more understanding than joy. "I never thought I'd say it," she said, "but I think I'm going to miss it." And just like that, the tension between us eased. We talked for over an hour. About bills. About the price of groceries. About the little things that adulthood teaches you when no one else is watching. She told me she was working on a budget now, that she'd started making lunches instead of eating out, that she was thinking about picking up a side hustle, not for extra cash, but to keep herself grounded. "It helps me sleep better," she said, "knowing I'm doing something, even if it's just delivering groceries or tutoring a kid after work." I nodded. I didn't say much. I just let her talk, let her own this new version of herself without my interference. At one point, she asked if I'd ever thought about selling the car. I looked out the window toward the garage, where it sat like an old friend returned from a long journey. "I thought about it once or twice," I said, "but every time I did, something in me said not yet." She nodded slowly. "It's funny, isn't it? The things we hold on to." There was a long pause before she added, I think I used to hate that car because it reminded me of how much we didn't have. But now it reminds me of how much you gave up to make sure we had enough. I don't remember setting my coffee down, but I must have. My hands were suddenly empty, and I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw my little girl in there, just beneath the grown woman she'd become. There was a softness in her that I hadn't seen in years. Not weakness, but vulnerability. An openness that made me feel like maybe, just maybe, we were coming back to each other in a way that wasn't forced or painful. I reached across the table, laid my hand over hers, and said, "You don't owe me anything. I did what I had to do. That's what being a father means." She didn't pull away. She just nodded, and for the first time in what felt like a decade, we sat together without anything between us. Later that afternoon, she helped me clean out the garage. Not because I asked her to, but because she wanted to. We tossed old boxes, swept up years of dust, and even found a few forgotten trinkets from her childhood: an old bike helmet, a science fair ribbon, a cracked snow globe from a trip to Chicago. She laughed when she saw them, real laughter this time, not the biting kind that stung. "I used to think this house was so small," she said, lifting the ribbon to the light. "But now it feels safe, like it's anchored to something." I didn't say it out loud, but in my heart, I knew what she meant. Sometimes the smallest places hold the deepest roots. As the sun dipped low and bathed the garage in a golden hue, she turned to me and said, "I think I'm finally starting to get it. Life isn't about arriving. It's about how you keep moving." I looked at her, at the woman standing in my driveway, and realized that maybe the lesson had landed after all. Not through words or warnings, but through lived experience. Through that old car and every mile she drove in it. Through every moment she wished she had more and came to realize she had enough. Through every breakdown, mechanical or emotional, that brought her closer to humility. When she left that evening, she didn't take the car. She walked, not out of necessity, but by choice. Said she wanted the air, wanted to stretch her legs and think. I watched her go until she disappeared around the corner, the kind of walk that says I'm not running from anything anymore. And as I stood in the doorway, keys still in my pocket, I whispered to myself, "It still moves." Only this time, I wasn't talking about the car. The first time I saw her behind the wheel of a different car, it was a modest used sedan, nothing flashy, nothing loud, just enough. It was the kind of car she would have scoffed at back when she was chasing glossy dashboards and nameplates. But now it suited her. She pulled into the driveway like she belonged in that car, like she wasn't putting on a show for anyone. It didn't sparkle like the SUV had, but there was something about the way she parked it and stepped out that told me she'd finally stopped measuring her worth by the shine of her reflection in someone else's opinion. She waved through the window, smile easy, and I felt something settle in me. Not pride exactly. Something deeper, relief, maybe, or peace. That afternoon, she came over with groceries. Said she'd gotten a bonus from work and wanted to cook dinner. I didn't argue. I sat at the table while she chopped vegetables and hummed an old tune she used to sing when she was little. Something from a cartoon she barely remembered, but that lived somewhere in the back of her mind. Watching her move around the kitchen, comfortable and unhurried, made me realize how far we'd come. The tension that used to wrap around every conversation was gone. We didn't need to tiptoe around each other anymore. We'd already walked through fire and come out with the burns to prove it. What was left now was real, raw, honest. We ate on the back porch, the autumn air crisp enough to keep the bugs away, but warm enough for comfort. She told me stories about work, about her coworkers, her new manager, a client who reminded her too much of her younger self. "She's always talking about what she's going to buy next," she said, stirring the last of her soup. Like that's the finish line. I just keep thinking, does she even know what it costs to keep all that? I nodded, but I didn't add anything. I could see she already knew. There was a weariness in her voice that didn't come from exhaustion. It came from understanding. And that's something no parent can teach. Life teaches it. In bills, in late fees, in public embarrassment, in repo trucks and long walks home. Later that night, she pulled a folded piece of paper from her purse and handed it to me. It was a repayment plan, modest, stretched over time, nothing dramatic. She wanted to pay me back for using the old car. I didn't expect it, never asked for it, but I could tell this meant something to her. A way of standing on her own feet again. A declaration of independence that didn't come with designer trim. I didn't argue. I just nodded, folded the paper, and tucked it into a drawer. Not because I planned to hold her to it, but because I knew she needed to believe she'd earned her way forward. And in many ways, she had. The neighbors started noticing. Small-town eyes don't miss much. One of them, Linda, from 2 doors down, stopped me on a walk and said, "Your girl's really grown up, huh?" I nodded, unsure how to summarize years of heartache and healing in a single sentence. "She's figuring it out," I said instead. And that felt more true than anything else. Linda smiled and added, "I always thought you were too hard on her, but maybe that's what she needed." I didn't respond. People like to narrate stories they only see from the outside. They don't understand the weight of raising a child alone, of being both the soft shoulder and the strict hand. But I appreciated the recognition, even if it came late. One evening, a friend of hers dropped by while she was visiting. A woman her age, sharp suit, nice watch, car keys that jingled with a dealership tag still on them. I watched them from the kitchen window as they stood in the driveway, talking. Her friend pointed at the old car in the garage and said something that made my daughter laugh, then pause. She said something back, and her friend's eyebrows lifted. I couldn't hear what was said, but when the friend left, my daughter came inside and sat next to me on the couch. She asked if that was the car, she said. "The one I made fun of." I raised an eyebrow. "What did you tell her?" She smiled, small and steady. "I told her it taught me more than any class or internship ever did." That answer felt like a full-circle moment, the kind of admission you don't get often in life. I didn't press for more. That was enough. The old car never did get sold. It sat in the garage like an old photo album, full of scratches, memories, and quiet testimony. I'd start it up every now and then, just to hear it hum. It always did. Like it was reminding me that some things don't need to be replaced, just maintained. My daughter began visiting more frequently, sometimes just to talk, sometimes to help around the house. We didn't talk about the past much. The shame, the fights, the silences, they didn't need repeating. What mattered was that we both kept showing up. That was the new language we spoke. Presence. One Saturday, we took the old car out for a drive. No destination in mind, just open road and time. She drove, hands loose on the wheel, windows cracked open. We didn't talk much. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was just there. Easy. I watched her navigate the streets she once felt too big for. Watched her turn corners without hesitation. I thought back to the day she first called it an embarrassment and felt no bitterness. Just perspective. Growth doesn't always look like success. Sometimes it looks like humility behind the wheel of a car you once swore you'd never touch. As we pulled back into the driveway, she turned to me and said, "You were right." I looked at her, waiting. "About what?" I asked. She smiled and ran her fingers along the steering wheel. "It still moves." The old car never left my life, not really. Even when newer, shinier models passed us by on the street. Even when neighbors asked if I'd thought about trading it in for something more up-to-date. It stayed parked in my garage like an old friend who knew too many secrets to be let go. Every scratch had a story. Every worn tire, every smudge on the dash, every stubborn window that needed a little coaxing to roll down. It held more than parts. It held memory. It held everything I never said out loud. And now, it held the quiet pride of a lesson that finally landed. Years went by, and my daughter never forgot what that car meant. She'd bring it up in casual conversations like a relic of her transformation, a turning point in her story. "I used to think I was too good for that car," she'd say to friends or coworkers. "But it was too good for me, really. I just didn't see it at the time." The people who heard her say that didn't always understand, but I did. I heard what was underneath, the humility, the gratitude, the unspoken apology. That car, once a symbol of all she wanted to escape, became a benchmark of who she used to be and how far she'd come. One day, she called me from a dealership, not the luxury kind, not one with marble floors and salespeople in suits. A modest used lot where the cars were clean, not fancy. "I think I found the one," she said, excitement in her voice. I drove out to meet her. She showed me a compact hybrid, efficient and well cared for, nothing flashy. It's within budget, she said proudly. No loans. Just savings. I looked at the car, then at her, standing tall in the afternoon light, and nodded. It wasn't about the car, not really. It was about her choosing stability over spectacle. Choosing to move forward without stepping on her past. We stood in silence as she signed the papers, a different kind of ceremony this time. No balloon arches, no big posts on social media. Just a simple handshake and a handshake's worth of dignity. As she slid into the driver's seat of her new car, she glanced back at me and smiled. Still moves, she said with a grin. It wasn't a callback. It was a statement. A declaration that she got it now. Fully. Completely. And in that moment, I felt something uncoil in me, something I didn't realize I'd still been holding on to. She didn't just grow up. She grew wise. That evening, she came back to the house and asked if we could go for a ride. Not in the new car. In the old one. I laughed, but I agreed. We pulled out of the garage, the engine humming just like it always did. The seat still tilted slightly to the left. The smell of old upholstery and time lingered in the air. She drove this time, both hands on the wheel, eyes steady on the road. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. The silence said everything. We passed by the school she used to attend, the park where she learned to ride her first bike, the corner store we used to walk to for snacks when we couldn't afford to eat out. Each landmark a chapter. Each turn a page. Eventually, we ended up back in the driveway. She turned the engine off and sat there for a while, not moving. I've been thinking, she said. One day, when I have kids, I want to keep this car. Let them see it. Let them drive it even. Not because it's reliable anymore, but because it's real. Because it's a reminder that you don't need to chase image to have value. I didn't respond right away. I was too busy feeling the fullness of that moment press against my ribs like a heartbeat. I reached out, squeezed her shoulder, and said, "That's all I ever hoped for." Sometime later, she had the car detailed. Not changed, just cleaned up. She didn't try to cover the dents. Said they added character. She kept it parked under a tarp in her garage, started it every few weeks, let it breathe. She treated it like history, like heritage. Friends would come over and laugh, ask her why she kept such a relic. She'd smile and say, "This car taught me how to drive and how to grow up." And that was that. No explanations, no defenses, just truth, plain and simple. I've watched her become a version of herself I wasn't sure I'd get to see. Not perfect, but thoughtful, responsible, grounded. She sends money to help a friend through school. She volunteers on weekends. She calls me just to talk. No crisis behind the call. That's the legacy I care about. Not the money, not the job title, not the image, but the heart, the grit, the quiet strength that says, "I made mistakes and I learned." That car may never be worth much on paper, but in this family, it's priceless. So now, when I hear people talk about value, about what something's worth, I think of her. I think of that car. I think of the miles, not the model. The journey, not the brand. And I remind myself that respect isn't bought. It's built, one hard-earned mile at a time. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever been judged for what you drive or how you live, or if you've had to earn someone's respect the long way, then this one was for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real stories about family, struggle, and standing tall in your truth. See you soon in the next story.